Man's history has included a lot of moving. Through time, man has always wanted to go from one place to another. To get from point A to point B, he built machines to accomplish the task. As simple as they were, they worked. Man made improvements, and travel got better, at a breathtaking pace. While railroads were building this country, man's yearning to move independently, to go anywhere, anytime, led to the invention of the car. Basic at first, but that too got better. The car led to the invention of the gas station. That led to high prices, but that's another story. Soon, man learned how to move things and people in mass quantity, building huge ships to sail around the world. Big motor coaches made land travel exciting and comfortable with the use of air conditioning and onboard restrooms. Air travel took on new heights. This Constellation had 3 tails, and its 4 propellered engines produced 10,000 horsepower. But in this story of transportation, the romance of the rails has never left us. We still ride the train, but only faster. Today's trains and transit systems move the nation's goods and ourselves with ease. Watching them makes us think of yesterday, and preserving yesterday in the Star City of the South is the Roanoke chapter of the National Railway Historical Society, a group of individuals who have spent their own free time preserving a piece of Roanoke's history, a piece that has become very dear to them. Some will say 1994 was a big year for this chapter. In this program, we'll relive fun times and smiles. We'll watch children stand to the call of Thomas the Tank Engine, and we'll see volunteers restore an old caboose. And we'll feel the sadness of saying goodbye to an old friend. This is the year in review for 1994. the dead of winter, Ken Miller cranks up the chapter switcher Alco T6 number 41. Routine maintenance is performed on engine and the excursion cars. Soon the weather will break, and there is plenty to do inside the coaches to get them ready for the upcoming steam season with engine 611. There is painting to be done by Bill Carson. Albert Miller works on the windows. And John Garrett is at home with wires. Before Bill Sherman retired as mechanical chairman, he and Richard Sherman, Bill Mason, Jim Ratcliffe, and a few others repaired one of those doohickeys. It didn't come with a name. That closes doors gently on one of our passenger cars. Coach repair orders are posted, and new items like hot water heaters are installed in the restrooms. Light fixtures with designs of long ago are repaired. Aging floors surprise you with holes, and they too must be fixed. All of this work is performed at our 9th Street siding, the old Viscose plant location. Chapter members come to offer help. Some drive a considerable distance to be here. We know that this group often takes a back seat, away from the limelight, but we cannot forget the contribution these people bring to the chapter. Soon, some cars will leave for the haul to an outside contractor, Lake Erie Railcar Company. Here, the installment of head-end power and new toilet self-contained systems will be added to the cars. Our look back at 1994 includes the death of a man who gave us many hours of enjoyment with his books and photographs. William E. Warden passed away on February 10th. His work on Norfolk and Western trains is priceless. No organization like ours would be complete without a newsletter. The Turntable Times, with new editor Kenny Kirkman, worked hard in 1994. We thank him and his crew for keeping us up to date with everything going on throughout the year. And thanks for the great pictures, too. A contributor to the Turntable Times is one who has showed us many pictures of life in Russia, brought us news of a local landmark. David Helmer reported the opening of Liberty Station, once an NRW train station, now a family-style restaurant. This historic building contains lots of railroad photos and artifacts, many submitted by our own Floyd Couch and Ken Miller, and members of the Roanoke Valley Central. Most of us in the chapter attended the opening. In March, plans got underway for the June trips with 611. Plans included a depot day in Pulaski, Virginia on June 11th and a trip to Glasgow and Lynchburg on June 12th. While Pulaski was preparing for a party of 10,000 strong, phone calls were made to ABC's 2020 people to do a story on Mr. O. Winston Link. The chapter also made plans for a school kids trip with 611 later on in June. And during the month of March, Mr. Art Bixby, once curator of the old Roanoke Transportation Museum, turned 90 years old. Mr. Bixby is a lifetime member of the Roanoke chapter and knows the 611 well. He wrote an article on her in a 1992 edition of the National Railway Bulletin. In April, two groups set out for the road. One was Norfolk Southern, starting the trips in its 1994 steam excursion program. A colorful trip schedule was designed by our own Ken Miller. It is becoming quite a collector's piece for obvious reasons. The other group was us, as the Roanoke chapter took a trip to the historic Spencer shops in North Carolina. Those who went enjoy the many restored locomotives there. The huge shops of the once Southern Railway still stand. And, oh, did we leave out lunch and that train ride? May 14, 1994, the railroad industry and the railfan community lost a true leader and friend. W. Graham Claytor passed away, losing his battle with cancer. Graham Claytor had an early vision for steam excursions way back in the 1960s with Engine 4501. From there, the steam program grew. If we love steam engines, it is Graham Claytor we have to thank. Mr. Claytor was president of Amtrak for 10 years. The Metroliner celebrated their 25th year in 1994. Under his leadership, the company was getting 80 cents back for every dollar it spent. He had retired 5 months before his death. He was also president, chairman, and CEO of the Southern and served his country well in the Navy. W. Graham Claytor and his brother Robert B. Claytor helped carry the steam trains into the 1990s, even though it would have been easier to shut them down. We will miss them both very much. In May, the very first run of the Wasteland Express took place. The Roanoke chapter helped by staffing a VIP train along the route in 1993. The trash train takes garbage from a truck transfer station on Hollands Road near the old East End shops. The trash is pushed into the tops of cars, and the train is hauled usually at night to the dump site at Smith Gap, west of Roanoke. Outbidding trucks for this contract, the railroad's venture with the Wasteland Express has been successful. Throughout 1994, your Roanoke chapter road crew set out to film the 611 running throughout the Norfolk Southern system. Knowing what we know now, we're glad to have captured some of her last miles on tape. Headed west for Asheville, just a few miles from entering Statesville, North Carolina, 611 speeds through an industrial park area and sounds its steamboat whistle for the many factory-grade crossings echoing off the nearby buildings. And for us in the chase car, putting goosebumps on our arms. 611 continued on to Asheville in a style men from Virginia built into her. At Old Fort, a diesel helper was added behind her water car for the 50-minute torturous climb to the top of the Blue Ridge Mountains. At Highville, the locomotive from Roanoke gave us this to remember. On this weekend of May 8th, 611 was just getting started with the 94 steam schedule. More than 300 miles east of here, we caught up with her again in Norfolk, Virginia on May 28th. Now, the Big J was on home rails. For so many years, big Norfolk and Western steam locomotives worked these big yards of Lambert's Point. Today, diesels call this place home, and looking at these pictures does not allow you to feel what we did that day. At first it appeared that maybe our friend was lost, misplaced. After all, nothing here looked like a steam engine. Things have changed in 35 years. But after a closer look, we could tell 611 was indeed smiling, looking back at her diesel replacements, wondering if they would last as long as our graduate of 1950 has. On this weekend, 611's face was posted in malls and grocery stores. The trip turnaround point was Petersburg, Virginia, south of Richmond. Along the way, she raced us along US 460 and surprised this driver in his pickup truck. But this was mainline railroading, and West Virginia coal still traveled to Lambert's Point. It's almost June, and we go back to Roanoke and visit the chapter's mechanical department once again. They were busy with the project every weekend, it seemed like. This is a bird. It's a live shot of a live bird roosting over top of the end of one of our passenger cars. Now, sometimes she got up and went car roof walking, but usually she stayed right there in her nest. This called for the professionals. The guys quickly got her down, and it didn't seem right to take her to Indiana or the next steam train anyway. Checking the other cars, our crew now finds a bottle in the same situation. Oh, it didn't have a nest, but it was riding up there apparently for years. Somewhere, somebody threw it up there.
Boy, I bet we had a hell of a time finding that rattle, didn't we?
Would you believe that?
I don't think I'll make it this time. I'm going to Chicago next month on the Amtrak car, and I'm looking forward to
Worcester, Massachusetts.
it. was up in the overhead.
Up in the overhead.
Worcester, Massachusetts.
You might think we're showing a lot of the mechanical department in this program. We need to. New directions will be taken in 1995. We need more people, more friends down here, preserving history like this. Everybody in this chapter has a talent, no matter how small. Throughout the entire year, these guys went about restoring our N&W caboose. That's it in this winter shot, rough looking as it is and in need of a good paint job. The interior has been redone. New walls, floors, nothing has been forgotten. And all of this work is done mainly by hand, except for a few power tools. As the year went by, several members came down and helped spray on new red paint. It's not complete, but this group can be proud of what they've done so far. It is May 31st, 1994. .611 deadheads to Roanoke from Norfolk to power a school kids trip to Bluefield in the first week of June. She would come this way 2 more times in her final year, but because of the nature of those 2 trips, it is this one right here that we will remember her best. Assaulting Blue Ridge grade with a full train. Steam's finest moment. The school kids trip was put on by the Virginia Museum of Transportation with Director Kay Houck. Roanoke chapter members staffed the train and had to maintain order at all times. The line to Bluefield is scenic. Here is where all 14 Class J's ran in the days of steam. 611 was just one of the locomotives that pulled the name trains like the Pocahontas and the Powhatan Arrow, to name a few. The Roanoke chapter has operated many trips along this route, and many times each trip was a sellout. We ran our last trip along this way in October as part of the Roanoke Railway Festival. On June 4th, 611 departed Bluefield for the Black Diamond Limited, a trip running to Cedar Bluff near Richlands, Virginia, then along the Dry Fork Branch, the original Yeager and Southern line, through the scenic but rugged Pocahontas coal fields that made the mighty coal-hauling Norfolk and Western Railway famous. The trip was operated and staffed by the Pocahontas chapter NRHS, with members of the Roanoke chapter helping out. The train went through Yeager, West Virginia, in McDowell County. Years back when coal was king, McDowell County was on the top of the list of producers. 611 returned to Bluefield that day. Now let's go back to the chapter's 9th Street siding on a very hot summer day, according to the upper left-hand corner of this sign, and watch our gang strip some old peeling red paint off of combine car number 727. This is 8 hours of work in 1 minute.
All right, how do you shut it off?
From here, our year became busy. Our June trips on the 11th and 12th were coming up fast. The crew for the trips attended our mandatory safety session, making sure everyone was familiar with working on the train. ABC's 2020 crew would be our special guest, and last-minute touch-ups were performed in the rear car, the Mardi Gras. A very famous photographer will be riding with us in this car, and our trips to Glade Spring and Glasgow, Virginia will be seen on national television. The ABC crew fell in love with Engine 611. Finally, our special passenger arrived before trip day. Mr. O. Winston Link was at the Pulaski passenger station, and we were there to greet him. Mr. Link's lifelong work of photographing NRW steam trains was largely wiped out, stolen, by his wife. It's a sad tale with Mr. Link robbed of the thing he cared for most. And the last 2 minutes of Bob Brown's wonderful story sums it up.
The only way Mr. Link can rebuild his life financially now is to return once again to his old love, the steam engine. From the negatives he took so many years ago, he is making new prints to replace the thousands with which his wife absconded. It is a time-consuming process and painful for this 79-year-old man to stand for the hours it takes to get one acceptable print. Many are discarded after they develop because they don't look right to him, as his mind's eye roams back over the years. But when they are right, they materialize like apparitions, these scenes from the past. There is life in them yet. Early in the summer, Winston Link, reunited with his friend Laurie O'Gara, went to one of the few places where you can still see a steam train and ride it on special occasions, back to a Norfolk and Western station in Roanoke, Virginia, where a steam locomotive is brought out to run for tourists and train buffs twice a year.
There's Mr. Scott.
If you look closely, you can find many of the locations where Mr. Link set up his camera 2 generations ago. Everyday places to a jaded eye, but enchanted landscapes to the eye of Winston Link. How quickly they were captured by his flash, and how quickly they were gone.
There was a time in your life when steam locomotives were the most important thing to you. What's the most important thing to you now?
Steam locomotives, I guess. It's the one thing I can count on. I couldn't count on her anymore.
These trains then speak a language that tells you what they're thinking, what they're doing.
Yeah.
No secrets, no hidden agendas, just the language of
The sounds of the engine and how it's doing. Yeah, it's beautiful stuff.
Our year was flying by. We held a mailing party in July to send off our new souvenir department's mail order catalog. Designed by Ken Miller, this brochure has been a hit. Grace Helmer says some items really go before they're here, like link prints and our own design quilt. September 17th and 18th gave us a chance to see the smiles of children at the Virginia Museum of Transportation, and the Roanoke chapter presented Thomas the Tank Engine from the popular children's show on TV. This road show travels all over, and in Roanoke there were 5 performances, taking in 5,000 spectators. The weather wasn't the best, but outside chapter members sold items from our gift shop, and despite the conditions, business was good. But the highlight was the children who came to see Thomas the Tank Engine. Soon, 611 was due to travel through her hometown on the way to Richmond. We followed her all the way from Bluefield that day. The weather was perfect. As we stood here at Blue Ridge, 611 was only hours away from an accident. After that, things would never be the same again. As 611 tied up for the night at the station in Lynchburg, a local yard crew accidentally backed a cut of cars into the string of passenger cars stationed there. Several coaches were damaged, 2 were lost, and one of those, our 1829. As the sun was setting, our shot at the Peaks of Otter was our last one before we went home. October 8th and 9th, Roanoke welcomes thousands of people from all over the world to the Roanoke Railway Festival. Star attraction Class J, number 611. That Saturday, 611 ran to Walton and back twice. And on Sunday, the ever-popular all-day trip to Bluefield, West Virginia. As routine as these destinations were, people would call in for tickets as early as April. Then a few weeks later, something unroutine happened. Norfolk Southern Corporation on Friday, October 28th, announced the end of their steam excursion program, thus ending a 28-year tradition. According to the schedule, 611 would arrive in town on Saturday on a trip from Bristol, Tennessee, her last revenue trip out of Roanoke. According to the official statement, 611 would then finish out the 1994 season, that being the Bristol trip, a weekend out of Charlotte, and finally, passing up the famous Saluda grade to Asheville. The train's set would then go to Birmingham to the company steam shops and wait final dispatch. Our cameras followed 611 every mile to the end. The rails were frozen, covered with frost at the foot of Saluda Mountain, a grade close to 5% at one point. Near the top of the hill, some trees were rearranged, and I nestled down to get to the closest I've ever been to the 611. And the shot was well worth it. Well, that was it. The last steam train to go up Saluda. It took a while for the thousands on hand to leave. Some motorists 5 minutes later asked, "What's going on?" We told them. It sure was nice to see a face or two from home. In Asheville, 611 stood there for her friends. Black flags at her marker lights and 12 black roses below her headlights. Inbound engineer Jack Taylor signed autographs as if he was Babe Ruth, while outbound engineer Bob Saxton prepared for the return trip. During all this, the chapter's last big project was SOS. It stood for Save Our Steam Train, a letter-writing campaign asking for positive comments on keeping the 611 on the tracks. Thanks to Salem Printing and Richard Shell for keeping the forms and papers coming. Our movement got coverage on Roanoke TV stations. Chapter member Paul M. Howe became our media spokesperson. He did a fine job, and we should be proud of him. The chapter mailed the forms out, and several thousand came back. 611 came back home on her own power on Pearl Harbor Day, December 7th, 1994, at around 5 p.m. We weren't paying attention to the time. We were all wanting to make this run last longer. Norfolk Southern did talk to us that day in their building at about 10:30 a.m. We discussed everything, the mail, and several options or plans. They said no. And so 611 sat at Schaefer's Crossing, her fires allowed to simmer out through the night. A bright note after that Roanoke to Bristol trip, we have coverage of chapter member Jim Ratcliffe and his son Brian on the 611 as she returned on her way to Charlotte for those trips. Jim is an engineer for NS, and he must have been real proud to be there in that seat. That's Brian maintaining 611's fires. Most of us care to remember 611 on the day she left town with the last train. That's how we'll close out this presentation as Bob Saxton pulls the throttle to the roof. with leadership for a new year, one that will have new directions and new turns. Your officers and directors for 1995. December ended with our Christmas banquet at the Patrick Henry Hotel, and we hope for the best in the upcoming new year. Hoping not to leave too much out, we have tried to squeeze everything into this program. A lot happened last year. Thank you to everyone who helped. It could not have been possible without you. This has been your year in review for 1994.